Hi guys, here is lesson 94, solving multi-step absolute value equations. We've been doing a lot of these with inequalities, but this time they're just regular equations with an equal sign. So just as a review, absolute value is a distance. They're always positive inside of the absolute value sign. There are usually two answers for these. Sometimes the answers will just be opposites, so like a -2 and a +2, but sometimes they will be completely different numbers, and that's okay. You need to isolate the variable, so remember to always do the opposite of whatever the operation is. And when you solve each equation, you should write the solution set with these squiggly brackets and your answer inside of the brackets. So, for example 1, if we have the absolute value of x over 2 minus 1 equals 14, we're trying to isolate the variable, so we're going to add 1 to both sides, and we'll get the absolute value of x over 2 equals 15. The opposite of dividing by 2 is multiplying both sides by 2, so the absolute value of x is 30, which means x can be positive 30 and x can be negative 30. When I write my answer, I'm going to do the squiggly brackets, and I usually start with the smaller number followed by the larger number and another squiggly bracket. All right, feel free to pause the video at any time to do the work and see if you get the right answer. The next one is -3 times the absolute value of x minus 10 equals -5. So again, I'm trying to isolate the variable, so I'm going to ignore it to start with. So I'm going to start by adding 10 to both sides. This cancels, and I'm left with -3 times the absolute value of x equals 5. I'm going to now divide by -3, and so I get the absolute value of x equals -5 over 3. Since absolute value is going to end up positive, this is going to be no solution. There's two ways to write it. You can write it as an empty set of brackets, or you can write a 0 with a line through it to show no solution. All right, example 3 is 5 times the absolute value of x divided by 2 plus 4 equals 19. So I'm going to start by subtracting 4 from both sides. So I get 5 times the absolute value of x over 2 equals 19 minus 4 is 15. Now I'm going to multiply both sides by 2, so this cancels. 5 times the absolute value of x equals 30. Divide by 5. The absolute value of x equals 6, which means x can be 6 or x can be -6. So I'm going to write -6 comma 6 inside the wiggly brackets. If your book asks you to graph this, you can still have 3 points on your number line. All you do is put a closed circle at each of your answers, no shading in between them, because x is only going to be equal to those two numbers. All right, example 4 is going to be 2 absolute value of x over 3 plus 9 equals 11. So I'm going to start by subtracting 9 from both sides. 2 times the absolute value of x over 3 equals 2. Now I'm going to multiply both sides by 3. This cancels. 2 times the absolute value of x equals 6. Divide both sides by 2 to get the absolute value of x all by itself. And so x can be 3 and x can be -3. So -3 first, followed by 3. And there we go. All right, let's do an example where we will get two different numbers for our solution. Let's see, I think that was 5. So if we have 2 times the absolute value of x minus 4 plus 10 equals 30, I still need to isolate this absolute value. So I'm going to start by subtracting 10. This goes away. 2 times the absolute value of x minus 4 equals 20. I'm going to divide both sides by 2. So the absolute value of x minus 4 equals 10. Now this is where it gets a little funky. we can't just add 4 to both sides because it's inside of the absolute value sign. So we're going to take what we have inside and have it equal to what's there right now. And our other solution is going to be what's inside the absolute value sign equal to the opposite of our solution right now, because this can also be a negative 10, right? The absolute value of negative 10 is still positive 10. So if I solve this one by adding 4 to both sides, I get x equals 14. And if I solve this one by adding 4 to both sides, I get x equals negative 6. So when I do this solution, I have negative 6, 14, and that would be my answer. All right, let's try one more of those. 3 times the absolute value of x divided by 2 minus 1 equals 18. So I'm going to start by dividing by 3. So I get the absolute value of x over 2 minus 1 equals 6. All right, I isolated what's inside the absolute value sign, so I'm going to write it down just how I see it, and then I'm going to write it down set equal to the opposite of my answer. To solve this, I'll add 1 to both sides. X over 2 equals 7. Multiply both sides by 2, so x equals 14. Same thing over here. Start by adding 1 to both sides. X over 2 equals negative 5. The opposite of dividing by 2 is multiplying by 2, so now I get x equals negative 10. If I write this out, I get negative 10, 14 for my final answer. Feel free to try extra problems on lesson practice on page 627 in your textbook. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.